Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this week's session of Cyber Aware, what's keeping you up at night. We're getting our Halloween decorations ready at my house. Things are getting extra spooky, and I just love the theme of this month's series because it's spooky. So I'll wait another minute to dive into the slides. I'll just wait until the top of the hour. There we go. And then we can dive in and get started and start talking about this stuff. Okay. Cyber aware, what's keeping you up at night? So last week, just as a recap, kind of where we're kind of coming from, where we're going, is last month we had our Modern Workplace Summit. I went through 3 of the 4 case studies that we're, I'm going to do the second one today that we're going through for this weekly event. I went through 3 or 4 of them. I didn't go into as much detail as I'm going to go into on these individual case study sessions, but they're all security and compliance themed, and we're going to kind of jump around and cover some different areas, but there's some overwhelming themes here that you're obviously attuned to. So let's dive in. Last week, again, we did our arts and entertainment industry of breach prevention. It was a really nice case study in what defense in depth means, at least at an identity layer, right? So this week, we're gonna talk about one of my favorite clients, medical and laboratory industry, threat management, information protection, and they're doing defense in depth. They're doing all the pillars of zero trust, and they're doing it in a profound way. And we should talk about what that even means, or how to even start looking at that or thinking about that. So that's what we're going to do today. And then obviously, please, come in and stay tuned for next week and the week after. We're going to do a manufacturing. We're going to do an actual breach scenario that happened to a client that we know that didn't want to do this defense in depth stuff. And then we're gonna, our kind of final week is gonna look at the financial industry, one of our other favorite clients. They are doing everything, right? They're doing every single thing, and we're on a continual improvement program with them. We're constantly solidifying their baselines and tuning things up, which is great. It's kind of the way you have to do it in this cloud first world. So a little bit about me. I'm the director of the security compliance practice here at Red Level. I've many years in the industry, I think more than 14 at this point, just in IT. I started as a consultant contractor in San Francisco in 2007, and worked in a plethora of industries and organizations, which has just been great for my career. Been 5 years as a Microsoft Cloud consultant, senior engineer, working my way up in those ranks. That's been the most fruitful and awesome part of my career, because Microsoft is the best, and they give you a single pane of glass for security, compliance, collaboration, productivity, business intelligence, everything, right? And that's just superior, right? There's some great individual tools out there, but for putting everything in one place, Microsoft is superior. So I'm really happy to be part of Microsoft Cloud Consulting for these 5 years. Again, I have a wide range of experience. I've worked in tribal nations, hedge funds, private equity, adult entertainment shops, is one of our clients now that I'm working with. So I've literally done it all. A lot of nonprofit, a lot of state and local government, a lot of financial sector, legal, real estate. So I have a lot of kind of compliance and information protection background. And yeah, I've been working in M365, Office 365 for over 8 years. I thought it'd be fun just to share some personal pictures. The picture on the far right, I actually took the day before yesterday. I was up at 11,000 feet up above Brainerd Lake, hiking up to Lake Isabel in the Rockies, almost at the Continental Divide. It is snowy and cold up there right now, even though it's not down here at only 5,500 feet elevation. I'm an avid outdoor dude, fishing, hiking, camping, and I like to read a lot of books. That's kind of my jam. So yeah, that's me. Let's dive into the case study. So Again, this is a medical manufacturing, a multinational. So they have, I think, 3 offices operating in 2 countries with a lot of international. And then there's a kind of parent company in a 3rd country situation. That gets interesting with compliance and regulatory landscape, as you guys can imagine. But they're a multinational company, and the medical industry is very highly regulated. As you guys know, it's probably not regulated enough in America. And it's not as regulated as it is in Europe in a lot of ways. So, we do a lot of work with our multinationals that kind of default to GDPR. But, that's just talking about regulation, right? Let's just talk about security. And when we talk about regulation and compliance, a lot of those are security controls, right? Compliance and security are not separate things. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Compliance says, hey, to be compliant, or to satisfy this regulatory initiative, you have to do all these security things, right? So when we talk about security, we're doing a lot of it for compliance, and compliance guides a lot of our conversations these days. Oh, HIPAA, well, you have to do XYZ, right? It's not like, oh, where should we start, right? So anyway, multinational medical manufacturing, they have 670 information and frontline workers. So, they're not small, right? They're a medium size. I guess they're considered a small business because they're under 1,000 or something, but I consider them a medium sized business. I don't know where those cutoffs are these days, or how we count that, but I call them a medium sized business. So yeah, they're big, they're complex. They have a lot of security and compliance needs, and as such, they've made the proper investments into the security and compliance space. So we love that. We love that people take this stuff seriously. We have some clients that are like, I'm not going to do MFA. Are you crazy? I'm like, yes, you are crazy. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. So we love our clients that are like, we want to do it all. And we're like, yes, awesome. So what does doing it all mean? That means a multi-layered zero trust approach to not just identity and access management, but devices, applications, all of that. Now, for these guys, we have solidified their identity, right? We're about as good as you can get for the identity and access management, governance, security, operationalizing, right? We are now moving on to getting best in breed for devices, applications, and data. Data is very tough. Data can go off a deep end, as you guys guess, data taxonomy, classification engines. It gets really tough to think about that because a lot of our clients come and say, oh, we want information protection for sensitive data. I'm like, well, what does sensitive data mean? Where is it? We can find it, don't worry. But what does that mean to you? So data is really the kind of final frontier. Again, like I said last week and in the Modern Workplace Summit, we really focus on identities first, then we move on to devices, then we move on to applications. So with this client, we're done with that, about as good as we can get with identities, small tuning and perpetuity. We're getting really good with devices, and I'll go over that in a few minutes. And we're really diving into application security, which has its own kind of deep end, but still incredibly valuable for you guys to think about. So in summary, do it all, start with identities, then devices, then apps, then data, right? Infrastructure, network is kind of off to the side, depending on what kind of environment you guys have. And then obviously, as I said last week, and as I said in the Modern Workplace Summit, VAO, Visibility Automation Orchestration, that's considered the kind of overarching pillar of zero trust that sits above and around all of those other pillars I just mentioned. So as you get maturity in identities, devices, apps, data, network infrastructure, your VAO increases, and you can start to think about the single pane of glass for all those things. So this case study represents again, it's a high maturity Microsoft 365 E5 framework across multiple trust pillars. So that means that these guys have the licensing to do this stuff, right? This isn't some F1, this isn't some Office 365 E3. We've got the whole enchilada, including Teams Voice, Power BI, advanced compliance, right? So we really have all the tools we need to do all of this right, but our focus is going to be on the security tools, right? The ones I just mentioned are compliance, business intelligence, and collaboration enhancements that you get with E5, which are awesome, by the way. The new compliance AI is just incredible. It can detect burnout, it can detect bullying. There's more advanced insider risk management. There's onboarding and offboarding governance with compliance. You know, someone puts in their 2 weeks, you can put a hold on all the stuff they do. It's just great. But again, I digress. We're going to talk about security today specifically. Great. So I have to show this off because I worked hard on this. They worked hard on this. My team worked hard on this. This is their identity secure score. This is as of a couple weeks ago, but I just checked today. It hasn't gone down. 95 is pretty good, huh? Out of 100, right? This is about as good as you can possibly get. The reason we can't get it 100 is because we have to exempt a couple accounts, right? So for an identity secure score, we have to exempt our break glass count. That's the whole point of a break glass. It does not have security policies targeted towards it, so that in an emergency, you can break the glass and get into your environment. So just by exempting a couple accounts from a couple policies, you get down to 95. Otherwise, this is a perfect score. This means they are doing all of their identity and access management, security and governance in the identity space perfectly. And this is really what to aspire to, right? This is kind of the dream. And that's why this case study is called the defense in depth dream. This means they are leveraging an incredible amount of interoperable tools to combat threats, to look at anomalies and risk detections, to do onboarding, offboarding, guest and external access, enterprise application registration governance. They're doing it all. This score reflects that. So again, as I said last week, and in the Modern Workplace Summit, go look at your secure score. Go look at your Microsoft secure score all up. Go look at your compliance score. But most importantly, go look at your secure score for identity. If you have a secure score of 60 or 70, you're doing a great job. That's fine, especially if you have E3 licensing or business premium. That's about as good as you're going to get, is low 70s, high 60s, right? Depending on the tuning of your individual policies. But if you have a secure score of 11.48, congratulations, that's about as bad as you can get. They give you those 11.48 percentage points just because you're syncing your identities. That means you are not really doing anything and you need to take immediate action or you will be breached if you're not breached already. If you have a score from 20 to 40, you need a bunch of improvement, right? You're starting to dip your toes in doing identity security properly, but you really need to take it to the next level. So that's what we're doing all day, every day right now, is just getting the score up for people, because this score really means something. This isn't just a magic number. This is a very hard and fast number about what you're doing to secure your environment. The higher the score, the more secure. It's that simple. I want to, again, show this off because we have a perfect score, right? We're exempting a couple security policies as per best practices, or I'm sorry, a couple accounts as required, best practices. Otherwise, we have a perfect score. It's something to brag about for this client and for Red Level. Great. So the first piece of this puzzle is that they are leveraging Microsoft Defender for Identity. And I'll get into how that fits into the larger architecture for our defense in depth strategy here in a moment. But Defender for Identity is a very fancy and powerful tool that really runs in the background. It is not something that you have to spend a lot of time managing once it is in place. Well, what is Defender for Identity? So it is a identity aggregate that covers your identities on-prem, so Active Directory. As you can tell, there's an MDI sensor either in your ADFS environment or on a domain controller. So for your Active Directory environment, we put a sensor on any of your domain controllers. Remote sites, your parent, whatever, we put a sensor there, and that is looking at, it does parse network traffic, it does Windows events, right? And it correlates them with all of your Active Directory extra user events. So there's two layers to that. One is that the day one of installation, it will immediately detect certain types of attacks or breaches, right? There's a chance you already have a malicious actor inside of your on-prem environment, and I'll get to the cloud stuff in a minute. So there's a decent chance, small but significant chance, that you already have some nefarious activity happening in your Active Directory environment. Depending on what kind of infiltration that is or was or could be, day one of installing MDI, Microsoft Defender for Identity, you will get an alert that says you have a golden ticket or a pass the hash attack that's happening, or it has happened, or whatever, right? So there's some important alerts that get turned on day one. Now, the second layer to Defender for Identity is a behavioral analytics engine, an AI. So what that's doing, that actually needs some time to bake in, to build behavioral baselines, right? So what that does is you install the sensors, you configure the cloud gateway and the cloud engine, and basically it needs 30 to 60 days. I usually say 45 days to kind of bake in, right? It goes in and it says, okay, here's all my users, here's the computers they log into, here's the behavior they do, here's when they log in, here's the IP addresses they log in from, here's the machines they log in from. It builds up a behavioral profile of each of your users in your environment, right? Including service accounts, like all of your identities all up. That takes a while to bake in. So basically, that needs to happen before you can get behavioral engine alerts to say, hey, this person's acting erratically. Hey, there may be a lateral movement or some weird thing happening with this account, right? But those two insights combined are extremely powerful. So what happens there is that engine integrates with your cloud identities, with your Azure Active Directory identities, and that correlates any data to say, hey, this person's acting weird. Oh yeah, they're acting weird in the cloud too. Or, hey, I found those user credentials on the dark web. Let's set an alert, right, for both the on-prem and the cloud identity because they're synced, right? So it brings it into the cloud world, right, for your cloud identities in Azure Active Directory. But it takes it a step further than that. Assuming you have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint configured and installed and is running on all of your machines, it also correlates device stuff with your user, right? So it's going to say, oh, this device is acting weird. I better do something about this user. Oh, this user's acting weird. I better do something about this device. Or let's correlate that data, those signals, right? So it covers your endpoints and your users in the cloud and on-prem. It goes further than that, okay? So it actually integrates with Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is my favorite tool in the world. And I promised you last time, we will do like a 90-minute demo of just MCAS at some point, because it's the coolest thing ever. Anyway, it will bring all of the stuff that I just said out into third-party clouds, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, right? So it can take all of that stuff and start correlating identity, device access, threat, behavioral sensors, all of that in third-party clouds, in Facebook, in whatever thing you connect it to, it's going to work in there as well. So again, Defender for Identity covers your on-prem, your cloud, your device correlation, your and your third-party cloud identity stuff, all in a very complex, fancy algorithm of a lot of risk signals. We can take risk automation from this. So if we have a high enough risk, we can actually block a sign-in. We can lock out a computer. We can do things automatically, because something like a SIEM, getting an alert, is not enough, right? We need to do something about it. We need to automate in the VAO, right? Visibility is seeing it all, but the A is very important. We need to automate things. So Defender for Identity itself technically can't do anything, but it tells other tools, hey, lock down that computer. Hey, send an alert. Hey, lock down that identity. Hey, reset their password and force MFA registration from a trusted device and location, right? So we can do a bunch of automation built on top of all this AI and behavioral intelligence and sensors that we have all over the cloud and on-prem. Very, very cool stuff, and it's part of our defense in depth strategy. So I wanted to spend the rest of the time here before I take a question or two to talk about the onion. This is one of my favorite slides because it's really hard to think about or talk about, articulate for us how all of these tools work together for a defense in depth strategy, right? Because people are like, okay, I get all these fancy initialisms and acronyms and MDI and MDO and MDE and all that stuff, but what does it mean? How are they interoperable? How does it all work? So this slide is the most beautiful, simple way that we can articulate it and kind of and make it more demonstrable for you guys. And yeah, you can tell, right, at our core layer, like let's just look at the layers. We have on-prem identity apps and data, devices, and SaaS apps, third-party apps and data out in the world, right? Not Microsoft, not your AD and your file shares and your SharePoint. That's out in Workday or, Salesforce, something like that. So first of all, notice on the left, MFA, Conditional Access, Azure Active Directory, Identity Protection. That is everywhere, all the things, right? You'll see how important that blue slice is for the onion because that literally operates at every single layer, right? So when we do engagements with our clients, we talk about conditional access a lot, and people are like, wow, or so this kind of set it and forget it. I'm like, no, you will be doing conditional access to the rest of your days because you're always adding on conditions for access. You add a new app, you need to integrate that in your conditional access. You add new device management strategy, conditional access. Application management strategy, conditional access. As you can tell, that blue slice on the left, it's all the things. And that's what we're doing for this client, for this case study, right? Is we're layering this onion. And this is our defense in depth strategy. And it's not just saying, so defense in depth to me is two things. One is that for each potential vulnerability you have, identities, you have defense in depth, down from there, right? Saying, okay, well, they can't get in because they're in a foreign country. Okay, they can't get in because there's legacy auth. Okay, they can't get in because they didn't get MFA'd. Okay, they can't get in because there's a trusted device. Okay, they can't get in because there's a risk signal. So that's defense in depth kind of laterally, right? But longitudinally, we need visibility and we need depth across our estate, not just deep in each pillar, but we need it across. And that's what this onion is. And that's why defense in depth is a broad depth, not just a deep depth, right? That's how I like to think about it. So that's what we're doing with this client and a couple of our other kind of higher maturity, more advanced clients, is that we're doing defense in depth individual in each pillar down, right? You get past this, you can't get past that. Okay, maybe you got past this, you can't get past this. You have to get by 5 layers to get anywhere. It's very breach proof, right? So conditional access is all the things. What are the conditions I have to access my cloud apps, my identities, my data, my on-prem infrastructure, my VPN, whatever, right? Conditional access is the thing. And that bottom line there, identity protection, that's what I was talking about with risk automation. So that's saying if someone's acting weird, I'm going to lock them out of everything, right? All the layers, the whole onion. I'm going to use conditional access to say they have risk signals, impossible travel, too many password attempts, erratic behavior, logging in from a weird place in the middle of the night, right? These are just a couple examples of risk signals that I'm going to take action on for the entire estate, not just their AD, not just their AAD, but also their cloud apps, also their device, right? All of it. So the other side of that blue slice, the kind of one that goes up to the right, is Defender for Identity. As you can tell, that covers your identities for on-prem and cloud. Pretty simple, right? Again, it works with those other tools. So those top 3 more advanced layers of Defender for Office 365, MDE, and MCAS, all of these things are working together. These are not isolated tools. They are all talking to each other, giving each other signals, automating actions into each other. They are all part of the same ecosystem. Again, that's that broad depth and not just deep depth. So, moving up to Defender for Office 365, that's safe links, safe attachments, spoof intelligence, anti-phishing, that kind of good stuff, right? And part of the more boring stuff there is DKIM, DMARC, SPF, right? Just making sure your mail flow rules are right. But there's a whole new paradigm there, right? If you're whitelisting domains, you are doing it wrong, okay? Microsoft best practices now say no more whitelisting domains. That's a pretty big, new, and revolutionary idea. And maybe I'll have a seminar on going into why that is. But there's some new thinking here. So just because you have Proofpoint and you have some anti-spam policies doesn't mean you're doing it right. So even at that layer, right, there's work to be done. And then obviously safe links, safe attachments, anti-malware, anti-ransomware within SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, email, stuff like that, right? Fairly basic. Then we get more advanced. Then we talk about Defender for Endpoint, and that is the absolute leader in the pack. MDE is off to the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. A couple other solutions are close, but the reason MDE is superior is because it works with all the other things, including conditional access. You can have a really amazing program like CrowdStrike that just doesn't have the same integration and visibility into all the other tools. So as a standalone product, MDE is the best. As an integrated product, it is so far superior, it's not even funny. We're doing a lot of those projects these days too. That is part of the E5 license, but licensing gets complicated here because you can buy that one as a standalone, or there's a security step up. So I could go into that a little bit if you wanted. But yeah, MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, is so much more than an antivirus, right? It is an XDR. It's just incredible. I could spend 2 hours talking about it. And then of course, the icing on the cake, my favorite, is MCAS, right? So I'll give a specific example of what we're doing with MCAS with this client is we're letting users for this case study, we're letting them access from an unmanaged device, right? Not a managed device. That sounds scary. Grandma's computer, your personal Mac at home, whatever. I am doing this in such a methodical way that it is actually way more secure than you have for your managed devices. You have to be on a current OS. You have to have antivirus software installed. You can only access via the browser. It has to be a current browser. You can't have any weird or malicious browser plugins. You cannot cut, copy, paste, print, or download from your web session. You can't stay logged in. You have to do MFA every time. Those are all the hoops you have to jump through just to access from an unmanaged device. So that makes the executives at this company comfortable with letting people check their email at home. Take something from OneDrive, put it into Teams, right? But you can't take something from OneDrive and put it into Gmail, right? So we lock it the heck down. We're compliant, we're secure, we're safe. And that is just one small iota of what MCAS does. Again, I could spend 3 or 4 hours just talking about what MCAS does, but think about it as a way to bridge all of your security, compliance, information protection into third-party clouds and much more than that. And yeah, you can see what defense in depth means here. You can see the dream, doing all of these things, having them all work together. By the way, there is a single pane of glass that exists that you see all of this together. A complaint we had before was that, hey, I have like 5 or 6 different portals. Yeah, that sucks, you're right. Now there is one page where you can see all of that together. Everything you see on the screen all together. Identities, devices, apps, data, all in one place. It is amazingly powerful to have all of that at your fingertips. It's hard to overstate how powerful that is. So yeah, that's the defense in depth dream. You can tell that it starts with identity and access management. That is an on-prem and cloud integration. The one other thing I want to add there is some soft governance that you need to put in place. There's not just buttons I can push in fancy technologies to solve these problems. I need to meet with your executive team and talk about what external identities mean, what do guests mean, who invites them, how do they get invited, who audits them, what do they see when they come in, how do we share externally, how do we collaborate with trusted business partners, how do we do B2B versus B2C. These are all questions we need to answer and integrate not only in our security controls, but also our broader governance strategy. From there, we go on to devices, apps, and data. We do that both in our Microsoft enclave, both on-prem and in the cloud, and then we expand that to our third-party clouds using MCAS. And then we tie a bow on it all together, defense in depth, one pane of glass, hitting all the pillars of zero trust in one fell swoop. That's the dream. And that's why this case study was called the defense in depth dream. I love this client. If you're listening, shout out, mad respect. So yeah, that's it for this week. Please tune in to next week. I have 2 minutes left. I'd be happy to take a question or two with the time left.
Great. One of the questions that came in is around licensing. So what kind of licensing is needed?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? So if you really want to do all of the stuff that I just mentioned here, your minimum barrier for entry would be doing Microsoft 365 E3 as your core license, then doing the E5 security step up. That is not a full M365 E5 license, but you may want to think about doing the full E5 license. there's a multitude of benefits and reasons. Power BI Pro, Teams Voice, and then you get all the advanced compliance tools that I didn't even barely, talk about today. So the minimum barrier for entry, doing the full defense in depth, is M365 E3 plus E5 security step up. It is not Office 365 E3. Now, you could also do an F3 as your base. So how about an M365 E3 or F3, and then an E5 security? That's going to be your entry point to doing this full thing. Otherwise, we can do some pretty cool zero trust with just business premium. So I don't want to make it seem like you need to buy all these fancy licenses. We can do a lot with business premium, but to go to that next level, you need E5 security and you need E3 as a baseline. Great question. Thank you. Well, I see we're at time. I don't want to go over. Thank you all so much for attending. Please tune in next week as we move on to the next case study. And you know where to find me in the meantime. Hit me up on LinkedIn, send me an email, hit me up in Teams. I'd be happy to discuss anything further. So thank you so much.